I'm Catherine. My name is up there, but I'm Catherine. I'm the manager of the Genetics and Reproduction Department. Dana had asked if I could talk a little bit about like how walk and talks matter and like what we use them for and all that kind of stuff. So I turned it into kind of like an overall presentation talking about not only that, but also how that factors into an overview of basically what we do for the most part. I mean, we do lots of things, but kind of the overarching thing of puppies and puppy parents. So here, this is courtesy of whatever AI that Microsoft uses. We asked it to give us a photo of dog and genetics, and it gave us what I like to call our laboratory retriever. So we have our little genetics doggy. So an overview of what we're going to talk about is what is the BCL, how it's scored when it's done, what happens to that information once it's collected. Talk about puppy parent candidate evaluation, that's a mouthful. How that looks for puppies on program, IFT assessments, how do we know who's the best dog to become a puppy parent, and then the big picture, making the best future superheroes, things like mating pairs, aka breedings, and beyond. So to get started, what is the BCL? I passed around the behavior BCL forms to you guys, that way you could take a look. Straight from our International Working Dog Registry, the definition, a method of assessing dog behavior. It provides a way to describe aspects of behavior that are important for us. And it has been validated and demonstrates the capacity to measure behavior in a consistent manner. Consistent manner is the key that lends itself to analysis. So there are a lot of different items on that, and we're looking at the dog, not necessarily all of those items in a given assessment, but we're looking at all those items and to what degree they respond to that thing. So like, how concerned are they with novel objects? How concerned are they with loud traffic or loud noises? How activated do they get when they're stressed? How quickly do they recover when they're stressed? All those different things, we're looking at the degree of which XYZ happens. So how is a BCL scored? Each item, so something like activation is my example up here, is scored from absent, very mild, mild, moderate to severe. Those are the numerical codes that go with them, 1 being the worst, 5 is the best. You can see that there are very detailed definitions that go with the score for each individual item. And there are like 40-something items on there, so you can imagine that's a lot to remember. That's why when you have a walk and talk and your advisor is got their head in their papers or their computer, that's what we're looking at. So that comes back to that consistent manner. We want to have really specific things that we're looking for. That way we can all be speaking in the same language when we score something for a dog. Then we have the overall score. So their overarching score for the assessment is a 1 to 9, 1 being the worst, 9 is the best. I like to say to think of it like a bell curve in math, where you have your big hump in the middle, that's your 4, 5, 6, that's where a lot of your dogs are going to fall. Up there it's going to say 4, 5, 6 is less adaptable to a placement, but that's because it's compared to 7, 8, 9, your little upper tail, your best of the best dogs up there. 7, 8, 9 is a flexible dog, very adaptable to placement across whatever placements you have. Whereas our 3, 2, 1, that little lower tail down there, is dogs who are unlikely to be usable or have very limited placement options. Overall score is very subjective. It comes down to what you are looking for in dogs. So I might give a dog a 5, Jenny might give them a 6, just based off of what we're seeing in our dogs. It's also very organization dependent. So if you have a really small service dog that places like 5 dogs a year, they might have a dog that they're like, this is the best dog we've ever seen, but they bring that dog here and we do an assessment and they don't want to wear any clothes, and we're like, this dog is not great. Where we wouldn't give it a 9, but they might give it a 9. So it is very subjective. It's dependent on your organization because it's how likely they are to be usable for your program. So when are BCLs done? I think you all know they get a puppy test around 7 to 8 weeks of age. I have a little screenshot that puppy's having a grand old time. Then with the puppy raisers, they have 2 walk and talks around 4 to 6 months and 10 to 12 months of age. These are my legs and a doggy I started. This is from Jenny's video. Then they have a recall or IFT, the GD BARD assessment, which is 12 plus months of age. You guys are familiar with seeing those videos with your advisors. It's done in this very room. But that is a very specific assessment that we have. You can see the screenshot with things like the vacuum, the stuffed animal. Was literally set up like this earlier today. Beyond says coming soon, and that's because our training directors and managers are in the process of BCL certification. That way they can score BCLs on all the dogs in training for things like benchmarks, or if you're evaluating a dog for career transfer, you can indicate why. And that's something that they've been practicing with, is like, you know, this dog is going from this program to this program for this reason. They scored moderate for whatever it is. So they're getting certified so that they can add to our data that we're collecting on these dogs throughout their entire training time. Amra graciously let me use her dog as an example here. What happens to the information that's collected? As you guys know, we record the videos of the walk and talks. We enter our BCLs into a database, and that will give us all of our historical walk and talks. So when I took the screenshot, Commander had his first puppy test, not first, only puppy test, at that date. That was his overall score. He had his first walk and talk, it was that date, that was his overall score. So this database will keep all of our historical BCLs over time. It'll also have BCLs done at other schools. So if we send a dog to another school and we do their puppy test, that other school will have the information from the puppy test we did. And vice versa. If we get a puppy from another school, we'll get the puppy test that they had at their school. So we can kind of see how that puppy grows and changes over time, and maintain that data throughout their lives. So, and we'll just store this little nugget in the back of your brain. The score codes 1 to 5 of that absent to severe, those score codes get factored into a dog's EBBs from the data that's entered. Next up, puppy parent candidate evaluation. This is a picture from several years ago now of some of, I think these dogs, yeah, all retired. These good girls are, I think on the left is Crosby. Middle, I'm pretty sure, is Dakota, and on the right, I think it's either Jet or Nikki. So all those dogs are retired. That's from several years ago. So when we're looking at considering dogs for puppy parents, when it comes to puppies on program, their puppy assessments can serve as a preliminary indicator for their consideration. So if a puppy is quote-unquote weak on their puppy test, I don't mean that with any kind of emotional connotation, I just mean like they're not a strong candidate for a program at their puppy test, we might go ahead and say that they're not going to be considered later on. They might get placed with a great raiser, they become a great dog, they become a guide dog, whatever, but at that puppy test, that's the time that they are the most a product of their genes versus their environment. So once they come IFT, they have a year to a year and a half of environmental impact on who they are as a dog, whether that goes in favor for them, or it goes the other way, or it stays the same, whatever it is. But when they're a puppy at that puppy test, they are mostly their genes at that point and way less of their environment. So that tells us that they might not be a good choice for breeding in the future because as a puppy they weren't confident, they were afraid of things, whatever it is. So then once they go to the raiser homes, we're monitoring their walk and talk scores as they go through puppyhood. Somebody asked a question earlier about like neuter notices and stuff like that. I like to say you can expect a neuter notice at 10 months, 13 months, or after the dog's IFT. And that's because at 10 months, those are those puppies that maybe when they were younger, they weren't really strong candidates. So we've decided before they hit that mark that they're not going to be considered. 13 months, they've had their second walk and talk, and we're like, oh, this boy is a lot nicer than this boy, or all these dogs are the same. What are we going to do? Because they look the same. Or after IFT, because all those dogs that look the same came in, and now we're like, oh, this one's the nicest. Great, let's pick this one. So we're monitoring their walk and talks. We're also looking for anything notable in their history, so we communicate with puppy raising and with medical if anything comes up, whether it's health-wise or temperament that's significant, because we want to know if there's something major happening, like surprise, this dog can't leave the house because they're terrified of getting in the car, or they can't go out in public because they're afraid of people. Whatever it is, we want to be apprised of those things so that we can make eliminations as we go. We're also thinking about, are their parents still active? So nobody in this, I almost said litter, nobody in this litter here has a dog with them, so I don't have any examples, but last group we had Buckles, I almost called her by her mom's name, who Buckles was out of her mom's very first litter, so we might not be considering a girl out of the mom after her first litter, maybe when she's later on in her breeding career, depending on what we're looking for, all those things. Do they have half siblings in the breeding colony? Do they have Are both of their parents still breeding? That kind of stuff. Are they a potential replacement for their parents? So girls are replacing their moms, boys are replacing their dads. So particularly when it comes to like boys, maybe they're okay, but the puppies they produce are hit or miss, and so we have a really nice boy. Let's go ahead and retire the dad and take that son out of them. That way we continue the progress of genetic improvement rather than continuing the dad who makes puppies. We can take this nicer one and make better puppies. So IFT assessments, or the GD BART. The GD BART is a specific type of assessment. You guys have seen them before. We have all these little specific elements like vacuum, tight space, exam table, underfootings, all that good stuff. This one is done at 12 to 18 months of age when the dog is recalled or comes IFT. At the bottom you'll see occasionally, like today, we had some early IFT assessments. This is helpful for us to narrow down BEs on puppy program, especially when our boys like to look the same. And then it also decreases the number of assessments we have the day of IFT, so dogs can settle into the kennel faster. But back to the other note is about IFT. Sometimes we'll make eliminations right after we do assessments, and that's for things like a dog who has maybe a significant concern. So like maybe they can't complete their assessment because they got stressed and now they can't stop zooming around the room. Or maybe they got stressed and they're like, I'm going to go lay by the door and I'm going to wait till someone comes and get me. Or something like harness sensitivity. Sometimes dogs, it's not frequent, thankfully, because of breeding. But sometimes we do have a dog who really doesn't like having that harness handle on their back, and they're like, maybe if I sit lower, it'll stop touching me. And so they're really uncomfortable, so we don't want that dog for breeding, because obviously we do make dogs who are guide dogs. And then sometimes we have a group of like 4 girls who are litter mates. They're all intact, and we're like, these 3 are pretty nice. This one's, maybe they're not good, but maybe they're just not as nice as the others, so we'll go ahead and cut that one. And I've been telling the other groups that I've been in this position since late March of 24, and I learned and have adapted that I don't send spays and neuters right after assessments. I'll wait like a week before I send them, because of course you all know that puppy raising is on their email all the time. So if I send it on Saturday, they don't send it on Monday, they send it on Saturday, and then people are like, no, my dog is going to fail right off the bat. But that's not the case. And hopefully this helps you guys understand as well that there's a lot of reasons we might cut a dog right off the bat. And occasionally we do have a dog too where they've been assigned to an IFT list, and in the time that they're assigned and they actually come in, we've already decided we don't want a dog from this litter because we actually don't need a dog from this litter, but we don't want to send it to you right before the dog comes in. So that's kind of the case too sometimes. So hopefully this helps you guys understand that, like, if it's the week after IFT and your dog gets cut, it's not because they're a terrible dog. It's because there's a lot of things that go into deciding which dogs stay intact. So now with all this information, how do we actually know who's going to become the best puppy parent? Bless you. A quick little genetics rundown. Estimated breeding values, I mentioned that earlier, or EBVs, are a tool that we can use to figure out which breeding dog has the best genes or genetic merit for the traits we're looking for compared to other dogs of its breed. My example that I refined because I figured out a better option is we're not comparing plums to pluots, and we're not comparing labs to goldadors, because they're different breeds, so they have a different genetic makeup and different things that factor into who they are as a dog. So we're looking within a single breed at that dog. They combine data on all the dogs, all the data on all the dog, and put all that together with their pedigree relationship. So are they a child, grandchild, grandchild, twice removed, third off the side, you know how it goes. But it takes all of that data into account and creates a numerical genetic merit for that dog for a specific trait. And that's important because dogs don't always produce themselves when they actually have puppies. The phenotype, or what we see in front of us, is the product of a dog's genes and their environment. So just because we have Fido who looks really, really nice, he might produce really, really bad puppies. So EBVs, or estimated breeding values, provide a data-driven merit to that dog's actual genes. So phenotype, what you see, is a product of genetics, the unique combination of genes, half are coming from each parent, and then the environment, things like mothering, puppy raising, puppy education, sitters, trainers, kennel environment, all that kind of stuff. That all factors in to be the dog that we see in front of us. When we're looking at replacement breeders, there's two ways that you can decide to select a replacement breeder. Phenotype, again, what you see in front of you, that's more real life based, where I like to call it the wait and see approach, which I put on there. You see the dog in front of you, you like them, you breed them, and you see what they produce, basically. It's your wait and see what happens approach. Obviously, that's kind of slow, and it also doesn't have that data-driven, all those temperament history data points in there as well. So with EBV selection, that offers the best chance of improvement because it uses data from all the relatives, how they're related to one another, and then somebody who's very, very, very smart writes an algorithm that gives us those data calculations to make EBVs. So Dogs Inc. is in the middle of those two, and that's because our Labrador Retrievers, purebred labs, all have EBVs, whereas our Goldadors of varying mixes, they don't currently have EBVs because the very smart people are working on creating those algorithms that account for how much golden they are, how much lab they are, and how all that factors in for all the different types of crosses. Because we have dogs who are a quarter golden, half golden, 3/4 golden, 7/32, something ridiculous like that, right? So somebody who is a lot smarter than me and probably gets paid a lot of money to know all that stuff, they're figuring it out for us. So just a little whimsical example is with phenotype selection, looking just at the dog in front of you, you can't really tell who has the best genes. We have our ghosty dogs that all look the same. A dog that's actually less desirable genetically might actually look nicer in front of you. Dogs can get worse with this approach because it's your wait and see, and chance has a big influence. But with EBVs, we have our numerical value that indicates their genetic merit, and we can know which dogs are the best breeder candidates before we even breed them. And it gets better once we do breed them. So these are two made-up dogs, Julie and Wendy. They're pretty much the same, except for Julie has some insecurities, whereas Wendy is confident. They've both been given an overall score of 3.5, so then who do you decide to pick for breeding? Well, if we take a little bit of a deeper dive, we would know that Julie had a first-time raiser and a trainer with 1 year of experience. Meanwhile, Wendy, her raiser has raised a lot of successful dogs, and her trainer has a lot more experience. You can see that their genotypic value, Julie actually has more than Wendy, but because Wendy has a stronger environmental value, that brings her up and might actually make her look a little bit better, if not the same overall value, that 3.5, as Julie. But really, Julie has the better genes. P equals G plus E. All right, what do EBVs look like in real life? Names have been removed for privacy purposes, so no one feels any type of way. This is an example of real EBVs that I pulled, just changed the names off of them. These are 3 littermates girls. I will add the disclaimer that these girls' EBVs, I pulled them for this presentation, so I cannot personally attest that these were their comparisons when they were chosen for breeding. So that's my disclaimer, but if I was looking at these girls now for breeding, we have their EBVs here. They have this IWDR index, which is kind of just like an overall snapshot at how nice they are. Pen hip, which is that's a specific type of x-ray that's read by smart people, veterinarians, radiologists. It measures how loosely the hip fits within the joint. A tighter pen hip is better than a looser pen hip, so that's just for your background knowledge if you didn't know what that was. And then we have our temperament traits, activated, body sensitivity, chasing animals, dog distraction. All that data, all those numbers there come from their temperament history, their BCLs, their relative BCLs, and that's why we say like it all matters in that data. If you're looking just at one dog at a time, female number 1 here, you can see she has a looser pen hip. It's in percentages, 100% is the best. So she's lower on her pen hip, and then as you come across temperament, you're like, okay, no big red flags. Female 2, okay, she's tighter on her pen hip, great, 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 everything looks pretty good. Unnamed female number 3 down here, you can see that she's also got nicer hips than the other 2, but activated, that's kind of low. Body sensitivity, that's pretty low. Excitable, that's pretty low. So if we're looking at these 3 girls as potential puppy parents, then we're going to say that number 3 is not the best option, and then I can say with certainty that these 2 dogs were chosen for breeding, and kind of to understand like why both of them were chosen versus one of them. None of them was a great stellar option. Again, this is current value, so I can't say when they were chosen X many years ago what they were, but at this point in time you can see that neither one really outshines the other if we're going to take only one. So ultimately you're going to take two, because then you can maintain those lines and produce puppies and see who produces better and take puppies from them, and then maybe not take puppies from the other one. So that offers you more, more dogs who are going to join your colony, and you can breed one for penhips, which is her low thing, which I will say penhip responds very well to genetic selection. So if you breed a dog with looser hips to tighter hips, it's going to respond a lot better than if you go based off of OFAs. So all that to say, that one's a little bit easier to directly improve versus sometimes temperament. You're like, I don't know if this is going to happen. It should happen, but it doesn't mean it's going to. So some other things when we're looking at dogs, especially dogs IFT, beyond their EBVs, once they're coming in, we're comparing litter mates for their health and temperament history. How do they look against one another? Also the number of males and females from a litter. Just because one litter is really nice doesn't mean we're going to scoop them all and bring them all over to become puppy parents. Because then we wouldn't be able to breed anybody to anybody else because there's too many dogs related to each other. But also then the puppies that are coming out of them could end up being really similar, limits our breeding options, it limits our future puppy parent selections, all that good stuff. Usually we try to stick to 2-1 if we do have a really nice litter. We take 2 girls, we take 1 boy. That way we limit its impact on the rest of the colony. Also, what value do they actually add to the colony? Are they improving their parents? Are they replacing their parents? Do they offer, oh, I still didn't fix my typo, dang it. I've had 4 chances to do that. Genetic diversity, sorry guys. You know, are their parents, either of them, from another school? Did we get that actual puppy from another school? Were they a cooperative breeding? Maybe their parents' are from another school. So do they offer us genetic diversity, which helps us keep inbreeding down and that continue to offer options for us to breed dogs and sustain our own colony of dogs. Then also DNA carrier or clear status. So we genetically test all of our dogs who become puppy parents. And that's been something that we've been putting more pressure on recently, is we keep an eye on how many dogs in the colony carry certain things, because if they carry the same thing, they can't be bred together. So even if they're not related, if they carry the same thing, we can't breed them together because that risks producing a puppy affected with some type of disease or ailment or whatever it is. We test for a lot of different things. But if it's something that we can genetically test for and we know that they're carriers, we might choose their sibling who's not a carrier and maybe not quite as nice of a dog. We're not going to pick a dog that's not nice, but if they're not as nice but they're clear for everything, that offers us literally all of the opportunities for who we can breed them to, except close relatives, of course. But it really opens up our options, and then also the more dogs that we take who are clear into the colony, when we breed them, we can get clear puppies, which again opens up our options for breeding in the future. It doesn't limit us to saying like, oh, we have a ton of dogs who carry this one thing and now we can't make puppies anymore, sorry guys. So, coming full circle, kind of wrapping things up, this is just an example of the pregnancy announcement that goes out. So the host of the puppy parents, when we confirm that a dog is in fact pregnant, we send them this little thing. I took off the bottom again for privacy purposes, but we have our 2 dogs and it says, congratulations, puppies are on the way, they're due around this date, here's mom, here's dad, and then you get to say, will the puppies be black or yellow? Fun! So we have our fun little pregnancy announcements for our puppy parents. Making the best dogs we can, there's a lot that goes into it, as we've talked about. Having good dogs, making good choices for mating, collecting lots and lots of data. This is just kind of like a down and dirty overview of when a dog does come into heat, we've decided to breed them. What are we looking at when we're trying to pick a boy? When we're playing matchmaker for our girls in heat that we've decided to breed. So it's just kind of mate pair selection 101. These are all things we've pretty much talked about. We're not going to produce any affected dogs if there's something that we can genetically test for. So if we know a girl who's in heat we want to breed carries something, all the other boys, or not all the other boys, all the boys who carry that same thing, off the list, boom, immediately. First thing, they're gone. Not an option, no dates for you. Then we're going to start looking at things like inbreeding coefficient. We want to have a low inbreeding coefficient for our litters. So that would mean eliminating close relatives. We're not breeding to dad, to brother, to half-brother, any of those things, because that's what allows us to continue to make puppies. Not only does inbreeding have its problems, but also then we have problems down the line if dogs do get more closely related in the colony. We want to avoid repeat mating, so we're not going to breed, we don't want to breed two brothers to the same girl, because then our puppies are just kind of the same. It also limits our options for potential future puppy parent selections. We're also not going to repeat mate two dogs. I used my dogs as an example. Neither of them are breeding dogs for context. But you say Penelope and Bobby were bred together and they made the best puppies ever, so we're going to breed them together 3 more times. Well, each time you breed them, that's random chance, right? So first litter might be great, second litter might be terrible, third litter might be 50-50. So we're not going to do that. That plus also the effect of taking future dogs to become breeding dogs. So there's that as well. When we're looking for boys, we want to pick one that's good for traits that the girl is not so good for. So if she's weak on maybe body sensitivity or excitability, we're going to find a boy who brings her up and contributes positively to those puppies in that regard. For EBVs, that's very straightforward. We have our number there for us to look at. But if they're not Labradors, we don't have EBVs for our Goldadors, so we're looking back at their temperament history, like I say by hand, technically it's by eyes and computer, but by hand, so to speak, looking at their temperament history, like what were they scoring on their BCLs for body sensitivity, what were they scoring for excitable, all those things. If they've had other litters, that's really helpful because we can compare their litters to one another and see what we want to do for their future breeding. So if we have a girl who's had 2 litters already, we can compare those litters based off of who they were bred to and then use that as better information to decide who to breed the 3rd litter to get in the direction that we need based off of what they've produced. So we also want to use males evenly. Again, we don't want to overrepresent in our puppies that will eventually become our future candidates for puppy parents. We don't want to overrepresent one dog's lines in those puppies. Just because Bobby makes really great puppies doesn't mean we can breed everybody to Bobby, because then everybody's a half-sibling and nobody can have puppies. So again, phenotype and EBV selection, Dogs Inc. is in the middle. Here's a little example, and I'm almost done because we're at 5:30 exactly. But here's like a real-life example. This is an actual real-life example. Dogs' names have been changed, but from several months ago, this is EBVs pulled on actual dogs at that time when we were making a mate choice. So we have Fiona here. Thankfully, all these dogs are labs, right? They've got EBVs, wonderful. You can see that Fiona's only had 1 litter. Her EBVs are a little bit weak on body sensitivity and chasing animals and harness sensitivity. Body sensitivity and harness are not the worst, but chase animals is pretty low. So we've already narrowed down like 80% of our boys to these 2 based off of what DNA she carries, siblings, half-siblings, parents, blah, 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 blah. All that other good stuff. Now we're just looking at these EBVs. We have Fido as a great candidate. He brings her up in all 3 areas. We also have Freddie as a candidate. He brings her up in all 3 areas as well. We can look over here. IWDR, when we pulled this data, will tell us how many litters those dogs have had. So Fiona's only had 1 litter so far. Fido, it says he's had 10. Not all of those have been for us. So when we send samples or stud service to another school, those litters will be accounted for here. So then it's my job to make sure I know how many of those are ours versus other schools. But when we do send, whether it's samples or have a dog come here for breeding, we do usually get a puppy back from that. So there is still potential from those 10 litters that even if only 5 of them from us, the other 5, we might have puppies that could potentially become puppy parents from them as well. So anyways, Fido's had 10 litters, Freddie's had 2 litters. So far you can see that there's already that discrepancy in their use. Fiona and Fido would produce puppies that are 0% inbred, whereas Fiona and Freddie produce puppies that are 4% inbred. I know when most people think about inbreeding, they think about people, and it sounds maybe a little bit alarming when you think about it, because it's just not in the same realm of thinking. But for context, 4% inbreeding could be like 4 generations ago, there's 1 common ancestor, and that's where that comes from. So it's minor, and usually we stay 7% or less for our inbreeding. Sometimes when we get puppies from other schools, they are more inbred, like 10% to 12%. And so if they end up becoming a puppy parent, of course their puppies produced are going to be gradually lower. So just for some context on that, sometimes it does vary, but we try to stay 7% or less. Again, that's going to help us not only for the puppies we're producing, but also our prospects for later taking puppy parents. Ultimately, Fiona was bred to Freddie with a 4% coefficient of inbreeding. Freddie has been used less times, but also not visible here is that Fido was used 2 breedings ago, I guess. And so we don't want to breed Fido to another girl in such close proximity, because then those puppies are going to come IFT really close together. And what's to say Fido's puppies aren't going to come in and actually be terrible? Well, we don't want to have a bunch of dogs out of Fido come IFT really close together if something goes awry, right? So maybe that's how you're feeling. That's how I feel sometimes. Just a little blurb about the future beyond is that we have to collect lots and lots of data. I regularly pull EBVs for the colony, for the labs anyway, because the cultivators don't have them. But I regularly review them. That way I can see when we're looking at new puppy parents, I'm like, hey, I want to take dogs who are really strong in this regard because we need boys who are stronger in this because this is where our girls are not doing so great consistently. Or they started having puppies and now their EBVs have gotten even better. That's awesome. Stuff like that. And then also increasing accuracy of EBVs. Schools who have a lot of data over many more years than us, the accuracy, or I guess you could call it like the confidence of their EBVs are like 80–90%, so really good. Whereas a lot of our dogs, they're starting at like 30% and slowly getting up to like 50 to 60% because we're getting more and more data into our database that's telling us more accurately what our dogs are producing. So anyway, questions? I've sent you all. Yes.
Kind of new